The first thing people noticed about her was how composed she was. Not quiet in a shy way, quiet in a deliberate way. She listened without interrupting, asked thoughtful questions, and never seemed rattled by anything. When conversations got tense, she stayed level. When others lost their temper, she didn't rise to meet them. She just waited. I remember thinking how safe that felt. After a string of loud relationships, arguments that escalated too quickly, emotions spilling everywhere, I was relieved by her steadiness. With her, nothing felt urgent or chaotic. Even disagreements felt tidy. "I don't like unnecessary conflict," she told me early on. "I prefer clarity." It sounded healthy, mature. She worked in a field that rewarded precision and logic, and it showed in how she spoke. Every sentence felt considered, measured. She didn't waste words, and she didn't say things she couldn't defend. When I told friends about her, I described her as grounding, someone who balanced me out, someone who didn't let emotions take over. I didn't realize at the time that I was describing a hierarchy.
The label didn't come all at once. It formed slowly, through repetition. The first time we disagreed, I raised a concern about something small, plans that kept changing, decisions made without asking me. I wasn't angry, just confused. She listened, nodded, and said calmly, "I think you're reacting more to how it makes you feel than to what actually happened." I didn't know how to respond to that. It sounded reasonable, insightful, even. "I guess," I said. "I just wanted to talk about it." "And we are," she replied, still calm. "I just think it's important to separate facts from feelings." From then on, feelings became suspect, something to examine before trusting. If I sounded frustrated, she'd gently suggest I take a breath. If I pressed a point, she'd tilt her head and ask why I was getting worked up. Always curious, never accusatory. "I'm not upset," she'd say. "I just notice you seem overwhelmed." After a while, I started to preempt her. I softened my tone before she could comment on it. I explained my emotions as I was having them, as if presenting evidence. I began sentences with, "I know this might sound emotional, but—" She never called me irrational. She didn't have to. I did it for her.
Our conflicts were quiet. No slammed doors, no raised voices, no dramatic ultimatums, just long conversations where she remained steady and I slowly lost my footing. If I brought up something that hurt me, she'd respond with questions, not aggressive ones, clarifying ones. "What exactly did you expect to happen? Why do you think that bothered you so much? Do you see how that interpretation might not be fair?" Each question nudged the focus away from what she'd done and toward how I'd processed it. When I struggled to explain myself, she stayed patient, almost kind. "I'm trying to understand you," she'd say, "but you're jumping between points." Sometimes she'd fall quiet after a disagreement, not cold, just distant. She called it taking space, time to think. "I don't want to say something I don't mean," she explained. "Clarity matters to me." I learned that clarity came at a cost. During those stretches, I felt suspended, unsure what version of myself she'd return to. I replayed conversations in my head, searching for the moment I'd gone wrong. When she came back, she'd speak calmly about what she'd realized, about how my reactions felt intense, about how she needed emotional consistency. "I'm not blaming you," she'd say. "I just need to feel like we're on the same level." I always nodded. I always agreed to try harder. The realization didn't arrive during a fight. It came during an ordinary afternoon. We were sitting across from each other, talking about something trivial. I mentioned, casually, that I'd been feeling tense lately, that I wasn't sure why, but I felt like I was constantly bracing myself. She looked at me thoughtfully. "That might be something you should reflect on," she said. "It seems like you're carrying a lot internally." I waited, for concern, for curiosity. Instead, she continued, "I've noticed you tend to personalize things. That can be exhausting for both of us." Something in me stalled. I tried to explain what I meant, how it felt like I was always misstepping, always adjusting, how I couldn't tell anymore which parts of myself were acceptable. She listened, calm, attentive. Then she said, "I think you're framing this in a way that makes me responsible for your emotional state." The room felt very still. "I'm not saying you're wrong to feel things," she added. "I just don't think it's fair to project that onto me." I opened my mouth to respond and realized I didn't know how. Every path I considered looped back to me being too sensitive, too reactive, too unclear. For the first time, I understood that there was no language here that worked in my favor. I didn't leave after that conversation. I stayed longer than I should have. Not because I thought things would change, but because I couldn't justify leaving. There was no single incident to point to, no story that made sense out loud. She's not mean, I'd think. She's not cruel. She's just logical. When I finally told her I needed to step away, she didn't argue. She nodded slowly. "If that's what you feel you need," she said, "I want you to do what's best for you." There was no anger in her voice, no accusation, just composure. I waited for the guilt to lessen after I left. It didn't. It followed me quietly. Sometimes I still catch myself wondering if I imagined it, if I was the problem all along. After all, she never raised her voice, never said anything outright hurtful, never lost control. But I remember how small I felt, how careful, how tired. I don't tell this story looking for validation. I don't need anyone to take sides. I just know that calmness can be a shield, and reason can be a weapon, and that someone can always be composed and still leave you doubting your own place in the room. That's the truth of it. Nothing more. Nothing resolved. Just something I finally allowed myself to see.